Good morning, everyone. For the better part of the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've been away, but it was planned this way by me that I would leave and then be back for weekends. And it's just, I was realizing it again this morning. Such a great joy to come back from all of these various visits to my family in the material world, and visits to our beautiful farm, and just now to Yosemite, all of which I'm going to speak about today. But to come back to all of us together, it just means so much to me. Friday, when I was driving down from Yosemite, I thought, what else in the world could bring me back? I wasn't sure. I could just imagine resting up there at 9,000 feet and making very different decisions. So I'm glad we're all here together. When I was thinking about this talk last night, Does God Hide the Truth? I remembered those books that used to be around. I have no idea if they still are, but they were in dental offices and pediatricians' offices for children, which would be a picture. And then there would be a list of, 5, 10, 12 things that you were supposed to find in the picture. And at first you would look at the picture and you just couldn't see it. You couldn't find the bird or the butterfly there was this whole list. But once you saw it, once it presented itself to you, then you would say to yourself, how could I not have seen that before? It went from being impossible to see to so obvious. I remember some years ago, my partner and I were sitting, we have a hot tub in his home in Menlo Park, and I said to him, oh, look, there's a dog in the tree. And it was just the moonlight coming behind and the branches. And it took weeks. And he was saying, I don't see the dog. I don't see the dog. And then one night he looked up and he said, I see the dog. It was just so clear. And then we both, over these years, have just watched the dog change. It wasn't there. It wasn't there. It's a silly example, but like those children's games, it just shows us that until we can see something, it's very easy to claim or believe that it's not really there. I remember sitting with those little books and think to myself, are they fooling me? Or saying, oh yeah, she sees the dog in the tree, but that's her vision. But then suddenly when you see it, you just see it. You will never not see it again. You look at that little picture in the book, and instead of one big picture, it's this coming together of all of these little truths that they asked you to see in there. This past week, I was up in Yosemite with a friend, and we just hit it, God's grace, truthfully, but it was absolutely perfect. It's been a very wet winter, so there's a huge amount of water, which is very important to Yosemite. The weather was perfect because it was so cold and wet for so long. The wildflowers were out in the high country, not so much down in the valley, but it was just a perfect time to be there. And coming back and wanting to find the words to describe Yosemite to anybody, I started realizing the impossibility of it. I started going to Yosemite exactly 40 years ago, right now. And for many years, and then for the last 10 years, I go every year. Sometimes I go twice a year. And I have yet to be able to find a language other than it's gorgeous, the weather was perfect, the wildflowers were out. No, that doesn't begin to say it. Because when you sit in that magnificence, there's no logic, there's no reason, and I am speaking more now about what we call the high country, Tuolumne Meadow and above, and if any of you have been there, you know what I'm describing. What happens when you're there, if Swamiji used the word willingness when he was talking about the Gita reading today, if you have the willingness, if you have that deep desire to feel something larger than what you know, something beyond yourself, you will have a divine experience up there. You will suddenly experience God in all of his beauty being made manifest. I had no idea that this was the affirmation for the week. But here is Swamiji talking about the babbling brooks, the trees, the mountains, the wind. And if you can get quiet enough and be with it, you find yourself expanded beyond any part of yourself that you've known before. It is, God cannot be proved, but can be experienced. So you come back and there's no way to describe it. John Muir said after he had just made the ascent of Cathedral Point, which is a grouping of mountains. Again, you can see it from the valley, but when you're in the high country, you're really there, and you do a hike from about 8,400 feet in Tuolumne Meadow up to about 9,500 feet to Cathedral Lakes, and you're right under Cathedral Monument, and it looks like a cathedral. You know, you're not thinking it, nobody has to tell you. You would have not even needed to know the name of the hike you were on, that you're in a cathedral. John Muir said of it, after he made that ascent, he said, this was only the first time I went to church in California. Isn't that beautiful? He climbed that cathedral peak the first time I went to church. Now, I will read more about John Muir. I don't know that much about what he thought about God per se, a spiritual path, how he would have described it. But in every saying of his, and hopefully I'll get back to reading you a couple, you see that he was up there having the experience as a very young man. It wasn't Yosemite then. It didn't exist as a national park. This was in the 1800s. He saw to all of that, but he walked into it and said, I feel this as a manifestation of pure divine energy. We have to be responsible for helping to keep it, maintain it, hold it in a way that others can come and find the divine within just by being here. When you think of what he did and what he knew, it's just so remarkable. I felt so grateful to him while I was up there. So this trip was not planned for very long. I was going, a friend was going, we discovered that. We said, wow, let's go together. And because I've been there so many times, it was pretty obvious that I was going to be the one guiding us. And I focused a lot of my attention on which hikes we would do. But we also decided to camp in the high country when we were there. We started in the valley and we did an exquisite hike from the valley floor up into the high country and back down. Then the next day, we took our little aching calves and we moved up to the high country. And we were going to camp. And we couldn't get a campsite in the lottery. It's all by lottery. But we both just said, we'll wake up early and we'll go and we'll get a campsite. And sure enough, we did. We were first on the waiting list, and we got a campsite. And on the way in, I said to the ranger sitting in the booth there, put us someplace way out. Put us someplace very quiet. So we go and we set up our tents and our campsite. And the first thing I notice, we're at 8,400 feet, is that I forgot to pack my sleeping bag. So that was a serious problem. It was already going to be a challenging journey. Actually, I must have remembered that when we were in the valley, because I took 2 little lightweight blankets and a pillow from this tent cabin that we had been staying in, and I put them in the car knowing I would leave them. I wasn't stealing them. I figured this will do it. But we're up there, we set up, and it was getting chilly, even at 6 o'clock as the sun goes. And then in comes our neighbors. And our neighbors are 4 young people who have just finished a 2-year college. They're graduating, and they are up here to celebrate. Little did we know. I was already wondering, but little did we know. So at one point, I walked down to them, and I said, because they built a fire, I had been totally focused on the hikes. I made a lot of mistakes, having not been cart camping for about 15 years. My friend, Lakshmi, was unendingly forgiving. Believe me, there was a price tag on all of this to her. But we didn't have stuff to make a fire. We didn't have a way to have hot food. I had actually bought a stove, but it turns out it wasn't made for a pan. Anyway, none of that really matters, but I'm trying to let you get the point. It was not exactly comfortable. They had a fire. So I walked down, I said, could I heat something over your fire? Sure, they say, so I did. And then these 4 20-year-olds say to me, why don't you come down and talk around and be with us around the campfire tonight? And I said, I don't think so. I said to them, you know, my friend's a little closer to your age, but I don't think you want to spend the evening with an old lady. They said, oh no, we're here for the experience. I said, we'll see. Anyway, I walk, it's not that far, it's just up this little hill. I mean, like from here to not even the third eye up there. I'm saying the third eye. The third eye felt like our campsite, but there they were. So I get in the tent. I have this little mat, nothing else. By 9:30, I am shivering. My body is shaking so much. So I said to myself, this is impossible. But it's 9:30 at 8,400 feet, no light. It's pitch dark. They're down there having their experience. Their experience started at dinner with beer games, throwing ping pong balls, I don't know. By 9:30, they were loaded. They were loud. They were rambunctious. I was shocked nobody was coming to tell them. Tuolumne Meadow Campground is one of the quietest places I've ever been. All the time, I've been there probably 20 or 25 times in my life. Never had a problem. But I said to him, put us in a quiet spot. Well, I take my 2 little blankets and my pillow. It's pitch dark. I get everything out of the car, the back seat, the trunk, pile it all into the front seat. You know, again, it's night. And I squeeze into the back seat, and I didn't fit. I just didn't fit. But I said to myself, this is all you have, so this is what you're doing. So now I'll just tell you, it was a very long night. They went on till 2:30 in the morning. I was freezing. I had, seatbelt things where my body is not concave. I never slept. I literally never slept. Lakshmi woke up about 5:30, 5:45, comes out. I was a bear. Just a bear. Here was this night that was supposed to be perfect. In the middle of the night, about 4 a.m, it came to me. I said to myself, you know, Shanti, the worst part of what you're going through is where your head's at. You were sitting here, I was taking their inventory, and I couldn't go down to them, or I would have. First of all, they were totally drunk, and that's the first rule of working in the field of addiction medicine. Never try and talk to anybody when they're drunk. It doesn't work. But it was pitch dark. I thought I would lose my bearings. If I turned on the car lights, it was going to shine right in Lakshmi's tent. It was a comedy of errors. It was, in fact, the perfect storm. But the worst part of it was where my head was at. Constantly complaining, criticizing. It was a miserable night. As soon as I realized Lakshmi was up, I got out of the car. First, I regaled her with what a horrible night I had had. And then I took off to walk to a restroom. And as soon as I took off, and everything was utterly quiet. Our friends were comatose, but everybody else was sleeping. And I started looking at the trees and this beautiful sun that had come up and the magnificent experience that we would have in front of us today as we did this hike up to Cathedral Lakes. And I had a total change of experience within myself. And I said to myself, what was more in the way than anything was you, because you could have been laying in the car all night laughing about the experience, which is pretty much what Lakshmi did with every mistake I made. And believe me, I made a lot that could have had a huge impact on her, but never. It didn't happen that way. So I tell you that because I want to come back to some of that in a few minutes, and I wanted you to have a feel for the fact that it was a long and very unpleasant night. Now, when we ask ourselves, does God hide the truth? And I've heard many people speak on this and give many different answers, but I want to say it's absolutely a resounding no. He's not hiding the truth, but we all have various, varying abilities and desires to see the truth. The truth is everywhere. After we did this hike, the very next day, or at the end of the hike, Lakshmi went out. She wanted to find a river to get her feet into the river. And I didn't go. When she came back to where we were staying, she said to me, I've just been to the most beautiful place I've ever seen. So when we were leaving the next day, I said to her, take me there. And we come there, and she had found it, just a short walk from where we were, this river with this island of, in perfect bloom, lupine, and rocks, this granite, which is so exquisite up there, making white water, and wildflowers everywhere, and birds awakening, and the wind constantly blowing. And as I sat there, the words to Swamiji's song, I just sat there and I thought to myself, sit by a stream and just be. It just came to me. The lilt of the water will gather your worries and carry them down to the sea. And I thought to myself, Swamiji and John Muir and other people know these things. I have heard this song so many times, and it's just like hearing this affirmation today. There's joy in the heavens, a smile on the mountains, and melody sings in the air. And it's just so true. You're up there and you're listening to God's music. Now, it's easier in Yosemite. Of course it is. but it's always there for us. God is not hiding anything from us. He's everywhere, in everything. We just have to open our eyes and see it. And just in case we would have trouble, he sends us masters and saints constantly to remind us, to say to us, I am here. I am in everything. I am made of pure love. And that's what you are. Look in front of you. Listen to the wind differently. Is the wind getting in your way because it's blowing some of the dirt or sand up? Or do you hear and feel God in the wind? Do you actually sit by a stream and just be, so that your heart can expand into being all that you are? They come, these saints come through as a manifestation of that energy to awaken within us the memory of who we are, constantly, repeatedly. It's like God saying, you didn't get it this time? I'll show you again. You didn't get it this time? I'll show you again. I will keep coming and coming until every one of you know. Now, there is such a thing as karma, and we come in with varying vibrations, and some of us just, well, we're going to get what we'll get. There's this eternal, sort of omnipresent tug on us, a pull. We feel it. You know, this summer, one of the trips I did was I went to visit each of my brothers, my blood brothers. And my youngest brother, he's a very good man. And I'm telling you this because most likely we all have people like this in our lives. He would do anything for anybody. But he's just living through some of the roughest karma. I won't go through it, but if something can go wrong in one's life, it does. And he has zero ability to look towards the light. Zero. It's the saddest thing to be around. And yet, he loves it when I come there. If I would go there 4 times a year, he would be happy to have me. And as you might imagine, I do not get drawn into his darkness, but rather I try and shine a little light there in any way that I can. So it's a perfect example of how we're not all realized saints, but we're being tugged and drawn. There's a memory in him. He's a good man, and there's a memory that says, she's driving me crazy with her positivism, but I'm drawn to it. I feel something there, and we're all like that. And that is why these saints just keep coming back and showing us. So whether it's in nature, in the way that Swamiji wrote about and sings about, and he has a line, there's joy all around us, why wait till tomorrow? It's so beautiful. It's like, do we want to open our eyes? You don't have to go to Yosemite to do this. Yosemite's sort of like taking the cheating way out. You know, you can't miss it up there. And again, I really want to be clear, I'm talking about Tuolumne. Unfortunately, you can miss it in the valley, but that's not what I want to talk about. That area from 8,400 feet up, it just bursts your heart open. God cannot be proved, but God can be experienced. And God can be experienced in many ways. We have to want to know the truth. We have to want to know what is truth. We have to be willing to ask questions. As Swamiji has said so often, positive questions, meaning we ask the question not as if we're sure there is no answer, with a little sarcasm and with that extraordinary doubt that is such a killer to spiritual expansion. But a positive question, show me. You feel that, you know that, show me. How does that happen? What do you think is the answer to this? There's different ways to ask questions. It's a guarantee that we will not find God, which means love, which means truth, which means joy, bliss. It means all of that. It means even at some level, just not finding life so hard, just not feeling like life is all work, or that once again we didn't choose the right partner, or how did we get this boss? It's the antidote to all of that. But we have to genuinely want it. And as soon as we genuinely want it, there's no way around it. It starts coming to us. It finds us. And as soon as we open our hearts to love, we find it everywhere. I want to just read to you one of the very many beautiful things that John Muir wrote. When I was leaving the park, I said to Lakshmi, there has to be a book of his quotes. He's really a remarkable, remarkable saintly man. And we all have a lot to be grateful for his presence here on earth. But we went to the visitor center and everybody kept saying, no, there's no book. And I don't know, I just said to this one woman, can you look? I just feel certain somebody had to do this. And about 10 minutes later, she came back and she said, there is this book. I never knew it was here. Anyway, I have that book, but this isn't from that. But he wrote, this is in the late 1800s, the stream flowing past the camp through ferns and lilies and alders makes sweet music to the ear. But the pines marshaled around the edge of the sky make a yet sweeter music to the eye. Divine beauty all. Here I could stay tethered forever with just bread and water, nor would I be lonely. And this is why I'm reading it to you. Loved friends and neighbors who, parenthetically, and by the way, were complaining that John was away and not with them. And they were always trying to tether him. He says, here I could stay tethered with just bread and water, nor would I be lonely. Loved friends and neighbors, as love for everything increased, would seem all the nearer, however many the miles and mountains between us. Loved friends and neighbors, because I'm here, loving, I will experience love and connectedness with all. He knew that. It's beautiful. The more we open to the love, the more we're willing to recognize that these great masters came for us, that they know our souls and how important soul expansion is. Like Swamiji said in the affirmation, not just reaching out and getting thinner. No, that doesn't help. And that is the way most of us are headed. But growing inward, expansion of the soul's power of knowing is intuition. And that is what we're looking for. And that is what these great masters know. We forget. We have karma. We come in limited in whatever ways we're limited. They don't forget. And God, in his extraordinarily loving presence, keeps sending them back because they know our souls and they love us in exactly the way we need to be loved for our souls to grow. And I will say to all of you, this is something I know to be true. Very few of us are ever humanly loved like that. Very few of us. Human love, unfortunately, it comes through that human being that has whatever capacity They have to love, but they also have their own needs. They also have their own desires. I'm not saying I love you all. That's the truth. And many of you in this room know that. And I feel your love coming to me. But as much as possible, I feel it is God's love. Both yours coming and that love that I send you. It's only this love of God that comes to us exactly perfectly, knowing what our soul needs. Again, not what we think that we need as a human being, but what our souls need to grow, to develop that intuition that reminds us that God is everywhere. When we were on a pilgrimage to Los Angeles last year, there was a monk from SRF who was showing us around at the Encinitas Hermitage. A lovely man, actually. When we got to this St. Francis circle, he said, you know, we all know the words to Master's prayer, God, to his poem, God, God, God. He said, I've made it a habit to recite that poem every day. So he said, let's recite it together. It was very beautiful for a number of reasons. The poem is exquisite. But here was an SRF monk reaching out to us, really behaving with us, knowing that we are all brothers and sisters, and saying, let's recite it together. He didn't even say who knows it, who doesn't. He said, let's just do it. And I'm not going to read it right now. But that experience came to mind last night because we have to ask ourselves the question. So many people came up to me this morning and said, I don't even have to ask. I can see you had a fabulous time. And we did. It was like looking at this whole group of people who just came out of this living discipleship program at the meditation retreat. It felt so silly to say, how was it? No, it's not how was it. It's like, let me just be near you. You were just so close to God through that experience. But then I say to myself, I am no longer in Tuolumne Meadows. I am really not near any babbling brooks or that perfectly pure, clean air, or the largest monolith of granite on the earth, which takes your breath away. You look at El Capitan, it's the largest piece of solid granite on the earth. You just go, how could that be standing there? And you know God. How do we do it here? How do we keep doing it here? That's what we need to do. Waking up every single day with this extraordinary gratitude. Never lose sight of our goal. That's what Sister Gyanamata said. Her words were, keep the goal ever shining before you. Ask not that your situation changes. Ask that you change to keep reaching your goal. Remember to keep asking God to come to you. Get up and say, God, 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 every day. Wake up and say to yourself, my goal is joy in God. How am I going to reach that goal today? That's what we need to do. Keep our minds open to the awareness that God is ever present, that our vision has been obscured by Maya, but it doesn't have to stay that way. There's joy in the meadows, a smile on the mountains, melody singing in the air. The clouds are all laughing to welcome the morning. Your soul is as free as the air. Even that, just hearing that, what joy.